Over the weeks, you'll just see us like deflating across the videos, just like.
So we were just talking. I hit record just as we're midway through that conversation, and we were just talking about our various camera weights, and if we have a preferred camera weight to do any various media. I was explaining this to someone else the other day because he was a client of ours was getting quite stressed about the fact he's not like he's not at his photo shoot weight year round, and I was just like, dude, like your shape for life is never going to be the same as your shape of your life. And I was explaining all my different ranges. I was like, this is where I'm like extremely shredded. This is where I'm lean. This is where I'm like camera lean. This is where I'm like lifestyle lean. This is where I'm beach lean. When you just know where you look best at each one, right? So yeah, I was just thinking, look, if we've got some filming to do potentially soon, I'm like 80 to 81 at the moment, probably need to be like 77, 78. So just thought I'd increase my steps a bit and put a few rice cakes out at the end of the day, and should get there in about 5-6 weeks, right?
I think mine's going to depend on the uniform, whether we're in t-shirts or hoodies for it.
Yeah, that is true.
I'm gonna vote for a few extra layers for the filming, I think.
Cool. So on today's episode, we're going to dive deep into training programs and progression models. One of the biggest fallacies out there is program hopping and the constant need to change a program every 4 to 6 weeks. It's probably come from the personal training industry, whereby every 4 weeks or so you change the program, keep your client interested, and keep things exciting, and you can keep entertaining them for the next 4 weeks before you change the next one. But it's actually one of the biggest detriments to your progress for a multitude of factors, which we can kind of come into. But what we'll start talking about now is how to actually start a new program and how to approach picking the right weight, and then the various progressions you can do to stop yourself needing to make a change 4 to 6 weeks in. Because when you make a change 4 to 6 weeks in, you often lose out on a lot of the muscular gains that come, and a lot of the strength gains that may be coming your way had you stuck to it. So let's kick off with how to approach that first program. So let's just take an example of 3 sets of 8 to 12, and how you want to approach that in week 1, and then what to do as we go along.
So I would say the main priority, especially if you're new to the gym or it's a new exercise, is just making sure that form is where we want it. Doing, let's just say as a split squat, for example, just going with body weight to start off with, not necessarily as a working set, but just doing as a warm-up set, do a body weight split squat, see how it feels, see if your position's the same as the demo video you're comparing it to, or the cues that you've read or have heard about that exercise. So just making sure that you're moving in the way that you want, because ultimately that form being in the right place, it doesn't matter how many reps you do, what load you add to it, the tension from that, that load isn't going to go where you want, and so you're not going to get those results. So making sure that the movement is looking right is important for both results, but also for injury prevention. And then I know we've talked about warm-up sets before, but just going into more depth on them, they're basically sub-maximal sets that will lead up before your working sets, which you can then just gradually increase the weight for. And this can be really good when you first start a new exercise or a new program, at finding roughly where that weight should be. So let's say you start off with a set of body weight for the split squat. Let's say they're quite easy. You then might add 5 kilos in each hand. Again, feels fairly easy. You might go up to then 10 kilos in each hand. Again, start to feel a bit harder. And then again, you can just start making those incremental jumps smaller and smaller as you start to feel it gets tougher. And then once you get to a weight where you feel like that's probably going to be about the right weight for me to be within that 8 to 12 rep range, or whatever the rep range is on your program, you can then go with your first working set there. So the way I would do this as the weight increases, you can just pull back on the reps, because ultimately we're trying to manage getting you as prepared for the working sets as possible, while also trying to minimize fatigue as much as possible. So if you did 12 reps for all of those working sets moving up to it, even if they weren't that heavy, you're going to be quite fatigued by the time that first working set comes. So potentially going like a set of 10, set of 8, set of 6, something like that, just scaling down as the weight scales up. And then you should be in a good place for that working set. And if the rep range is 8 to 12, that's going to be, at least the first time you do it, you're going to try and find a weight that has you finishing the set within that rep range. If you do fall slightly outside of it, because it is just an estimate that first time, so you hit 7 reps, or you can do more and you carry on, do 13, 14, it's not the end of the world. Results don't stop or start once the rep range, once you enter that rep range. Doing the extra rep is not going to take you over and give you a completely different stimulus. Doing 7 reps instead of 8 is not going to be completely waste of time. So you can then use that as a guide to then go on to your next set. If you got 7 reps, the weight was probably was slightly heavy for that rep range, so you just know you need to pull the weight back slightly. If you got 15 reps, then it was a bit light, so you can then just increase the weight slightly. After a session or two, you should have a very good idea of where you're at, and then you can start to progress things from there.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good description, and I pretty much parrot exactly what Ed just spoke about then. Another thing that I would also mention is, if you are just first starting a program, yes, technique is going to be number one. That's going to be the most important priority. And I would also recommend not putting excess pressure on yourself that first week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it is. The goal of that initial part of your program is just to get you moving, just to get you comfortable with the exercises. And also, if you're training at a gym, to just get comfortable with the logistics of a gym. Like all these things need to be taken into consideration. Can you pair certain exercises? Can you do this? Can you do that? Like all those things they may seem quite trivial, but are all gonna be part of your overall progress and picture. So don't think that you have to go in set one, never lifted a weight before in your life and enter the void. That's just we don't want to be pushing that, because we just want you to get comfortable with the exercises, and yes, make sure that you're actually filming your exercises and sending them to your coach, or you're assessing them yourself to make sure that your form is looking good, and you're obviously not feeling any pain, etc., etc. And once that form is established and you've spent the first couple of weeks just getting used to the exercises, then I think implementing what Ed just spoke about with finding the correct weight, trying to select a weight that is going to allow you to fall within that rep range. And again, that doesn't come as quick as most people think. I'm sure you guys would agree, it actually can take a while for people to learn just how far they are away from failure when it comes to selecting a proper weight between a rep range. You know what I mean? And that will improve over time. And being a beginner, you also have a benefit you have on your side, is that you can make progress even if you are 5-6 reps shy away from failure, which is great during these initial phases, right? And I think it sort of corresponds well with how you progress through your program. As you get better and as you get stronger and stronger throughout the program, you will be able to obviously find what weight you need for each exercise and be able to push yourself appropriately to fall within the allocated rep range as well. But I think AV touched on a really important point at the start, was not needing to change your program every 4 to 6 weeks, because as you can see, you spent the first 2-3 weeks getting comfortable with the program. Then week 4 comes, and now you're actually starting to make proper progress. So if I was to say, cool, fantastic, you just got used to this program, let's do one solid week, and now we're changing the whole program again because it's 4 weeks and I need to sell you something. It doesn't make any logical sense, right? So especially with that new program, especially if you've never been in the gym before, getting accustomed to the exercises, understanding how everything feels, that is going to be number one priority before really trying to push hard on the progression.
I'll say that even those who aren't beginners, even for people like us, even intermediates, like anyone on the spectrum, yes, you'll be able to learn the exercise quicker, and you'll have less of a learning curve. However, when you start a new program or you're doing a new exercise, it still takes a while for those muscular gains to kick in, because if we think about those first 4 to 6 weeks of a new program or a new exercise, the gains on paper look really good because you're adding weight each week. You look like you're getting stronger. The reality is you're just learning the movement. You're becoming more coordinated. Your muscles are learning how to fire to those muscles at the right time. It's all neuromuscular gains, predominantly neural. And it's only once you reach that so-called plateau, it looks like a plateau, but it's just a tapering off. Once you reach that period of tapering off, that's when you've learned that movement, you've maximized all the coordination and the learning patterns behind it. And that's when you really actually have to stick with it and try and grind out those extra few reps, add a small bit of weight each week, because that's where the muscular gains are coming. And once you cross from neural to muscular predominantly, that's where you make changes in your physique, which is why it's so important to have a few lifts that you keep in your program across the year, because that's how you make progress on it. And how you continue to make progress on it is through manipulation of rep ranges, manipulation of progression models, and all the things that we'll probably come on to soon. But the worst thing you can do is, once you have that perceived tapering off of progression, is to think, okay, I need a new exercise now. Let me swap out the flat bench and bring in the incline bench. Because what will happen is you bring in the incline bench, and now suddenly, let's say you're doing 40 kilos week 1. It's like, okay, I'm learning it. The week 2, you're like 42. Week 3 is 45. Week 4, you're like, oh, I'm going up to 50. You're getting better and better at it. And then maybe week 6, you hit exactly the same weight as week 5. It doesn't mean you've maxed out the movement. It just means you actually need to stick with it now, because you'll gain the most out of it. So the key lesson here is, once you've overcome the phase of being a beginner with the movement and learn the movement pattern, learn how to warm up effectively for that movement pattern, master your technique, okay, now the real work begins with it. It's almost like getting in shape. You have to get in shape to start the real work of staying in shape. It's exactly here. Learn the movement, and then maximize the movement for what it's worth once you've nailed down the technique.
Yeah, and I think this is where it's really important to understand that you're not going to add weight to the bar every single session. Maybe initially in that first couple of weeks, or 4 to 6 weeks, as Ash said, you're going to have really fast rates of progress, but that's all going to be, or a large part of it's going to be linked to those neural gains and neural efficiency. Once that starts to tap out, and you have to, and the gains come more from a actual physiological change, in terms of starting to build muscle mass, it's not going to be as linear as fast. And that's, if you actually think about it, if you went in and bench pressed and were able to put weight on the bar every single time, if you're bench pressing once or twice a year, like, it wouldn't be long till you're bench pressing 300 kilos. And there's a reason why not many people bench 300 kilos. And this is where you need to realize that weight isn't the only way to progress, but also that you're not going to have a tangible progression every single session, every set of every exercise, every session. And it's going to come in waves. And, some exercises might be doing really well at one point. One might seem like they're plateauing, but then, they can ultimately switch. You'll have periods where everything's going through the roof, other periods where you feel like, things are just holding still. But as long as you're being consistent and controlling what you can over time, you will see progression. It's just like, when we take averages for body weight as well, you might have fluctuations across the week, but as long as it's trending in the right direction in terms of your average, then you're heading in the right direction.
There's a big difference between doing a weight once and doing it 50 times. Mm-hmm. It's like if you've dumbbell pressed to 40 kilos once in your life, that's great. But the goal really should be able to do that week in, week out, week in, week out, and you'll look a lot different for that. And that's where I think people, you hear about muscle, you hear about dense muscle, and you hear about like that sort of like granite sort of physique, coming into these adjectives again. But I think a lot of it is repetition of time, of just doing that same thing. There's something to be said for being able to press the 50s comfortably for years and years and years. And you're going to look a lot different than if you just press the 50s once in your life.
Yeah.
Which is where I think the concept of milking the weight really comes into play, and taking that more macro approach as opposed to thinking I need to progress every single session. The earlier in your training career you are, the more frequent your changes should be. Earlier you are in a new training program, the more frequent they should be. But after a while, you should be looking at monthly progressions, or even quarterly progressions in some aspects. But for the most part, monthly progressions for most people is the way to go. And thinking, all right, if over the course of a month you added 1 rep, that's actually pretty good going for you. Like, for example, with my RDL, I aim to literally just add 1 or 2 reps per month on a weight, and then I'll potentially move up slightly, or I'll just focus on a month on crystallizing that. Because for me, the injury risk is high. I don't want to risk losing technique, and it's more important to dial all of that in before I say, okay, now I'm comfortable to move up slightly, or I'm comfortable to go for another rep, or go for 2 more reps, or whatever that may be. There's something to be said for milking where you're at and then making a progression forward.
Yeah,
I think for sure. And
sorry, you going?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, even if AV was to stick with that same weight for a whole month, but every set was intentional, every rep was intentional, he has done the work to still grow his hamstrings and posterior chain. Him going up a kilo doesn't mean that all of a sudden now he's bigger. You know what I mean? It doesn't go, oh, because he went up 2.5 kilos, his hamstrings and glutes have now grown. No. He's gone up because he now has the capacity to do that because of all the work he's put in prior. So when you think about it from that perspective, he was making progress that entire time, even though he was sticking with the same weight for a month on end or whatever it was. He was accumulating quality repetition, which was allowing him to get bigger and stronger, because we know volume is an important component of people getting big and more muscular. And then him going up in weight was just more of a representation of being like, cool, now you've put in the work, now you actually can go up. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's not, people seem to think that when they go up, that's when the muscle is built, if that makes sense. When the muscle was already built and now he's got the capacity to go up, you know?
There's something to be said that only works if the milking works when you are training to your max. So this is not to be done. You don't milk when you've got 5 in the tank, because then you're not going to get anything out of it. You don't milk in your beginner stages. At the beginning stages, you should be trying to make progression all the time, because there's always some sort of
capacity. You should be able to.
Yeah, you should be able to. Yeah, it's when you just can't seem to make progression. It's like when someone says, "Oh yeah, I've just plateaued my bench press the last 3 weeks. I'm lifting the same weight, the same reps." Okay, fine. Like sometimes it's not. That's going to happen. But the good news is you're at least training to your capacity, and that's the first question to ask yourself. If you are training to capacity, then yeah, milk. And when you focus on milking, then the tangibles will come after. It's like, for example, the new Bulgarian split squat I've hit recently. I know, like, me trying to make the next jump in weight is probably going to collapse my technique, and it probably will make it more on the joints than it will on the actual muscle. So now for probably the next 4 to 6 weeks, it's just going to be like, okay, how do I make this weight really good? And then when the time's right, add resistance. But if I'm training to failure on each of these sets, then, and I'm still not really making any progression, that's okay. Like, it's going to come. It's just your body needs time to adjust to your weight sometimes. And remember, I might get this the wrong way around, but it's your muscles grow faster than your in strength than your tendons, right?
Yeah, connective tissue. Yeah.
So so to keep yourself safe, milking is probably one of the best things to do, because it allows everything to grow at the same time. You know, your muscles become stronger, but if your tendons and your joints are weaker, then those are going to be your limiting factors.
I also think milking does involve progression. It's just not tangible in your logbook when you're only logging reps and weight, because even as you said there, you're going to turn that Bulgarian split squat that you've got at the moment into a crisper and nicer set of that. I mean, I saw the set; it looks good already. But you know, like, if you said you're going to spend this time, you know, making it as, you know, comfortable and nice.
Just on that, it's like, it's making that first rep not to the point where I have to scream to get it up, right? You know, when you get down to the bottom of the rep and you're like, holy shit, this is going to be hard to get up. Like that's the feeling that I don't want to have every single time on the first rep. But so that'll be a form of progression, won't it? It's like less.
Yeah. But also, I think, like, you know, if
you get Pilkington.
So I was just gonna say, you've gone back to the dumbbell press where you said before, in terms of like the first time you touch the 50s, say, on a dumbbell press. Although you may have done, say, 6 reps with 50 kilos, I think although it might not be marked down in your logbook, in 4 to 6 weeks' time, I'm pretty sure if you do 6 reps with those 50s again, the eccentric might be slightly more controlled. You may have a bit more range. Maybe that first time you did it, you did cut that 1/2 inch off the bottom. The change of direction may be a bit more controlled. There's no bounce in there or whatever. And so although the weight, external load, and the amount of reps you did are exactly the same, the precision that you did them with actually does create more of a stimulus. Because also, I was talking to a client about this earlier. Ultimately, when we're looking to progress our training, especially if we have a hypertrophy focus, we're looking to increase the tension that we're putting onto the target muscle. And although you can do that by increasing load, if that comes at the detriment of form, you're throwing more load at it, but it's becoming less accurate on that muscle. So you can either make it more accurate by improving your form, or over time you can tighten up form and increase load, and then that muscle is going to get a bigger stimulus. But it's the stimulus to the muscle we're seeking, not just the bigger weight in our hand.
Well, if you think about that as well. Like the first time you do it, there's going to be a high level of psyche involved. Right, you're going to have a massive nervous element to it because firstly, you don't know how it's going to go, and secondly, there's also that feeling of like, you know, when you talk about the reversing of the movement, you know, when the first time you do something, you almost there's an element of fear, so you'd rush certain elements of it, and if you do the same, let's say you do the 50s for the first time, you're going to have a lot of that in there. You can probably psych yourself up a lot. The goal in 4 weeks may just be able to do the 50s without any psych and be able to do it with complete precision. And doing movements without psych is another form of progression because psych takes a lot out of your recovery systems than you may think. You know, if you have to really amp yourself up to do a set, there's something to be said for how much that dents your recovery, as opposed to being able to do it and just casually walk up to it and do it. That's a massive progression in itself.
So yeah, so with regards to milking the weight and whatnot, that's another form of progression is reps in reserve. And this may be like a little bit more advanced, but if you do the 50s for one set, week 1 for 6, and you only had like, you couldn't get one more rep. But if you stick with those 50s for a month, 7 weeks, and you keep doing 6 reps until you know you could probably get 2 or 3 more, well, then you've also got stronger, right? You haven't changed the weight and you haven't changed the reps on the sheet of paper, but from a difficulty standpoint, you could probably make a jump in weight, because now what was a 0 reps in reserve in week 1, 6-7 weeks later is now 3 reps in reserve. Have you gotten stronger there? Have you gotten bigger? I would say, yeah. You know, you don't, again, for you to create a good stimulus to grow muscle, especially as you get more advanced, you can go between that 1 to 3 rep range away from failure and still get a good stimulus, you know? So another way to milk the weight, another way to get more comfortable with heavier loads.
Well, why did you say a month to 7 weeks? Out of interest. Like, that was a really precise. I think Ed started smiling as well. I think he was thinking the same thing, right?
So like week 1 to 7 weeks, 7 weeks. So week 1 to week 7. You could be using the same week 6 or whatever.
Yeah. Sorry, it was really precise the way you said it. I was thinking that what's the science here now?
It's not you're gonna get 2-3 reps in reserve in like a month. I think that's gonna take you a while.
It's more like the 35 days.
Yeah.
You mean 49 days?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I take weekends off.
But another way to make this, but
no, I get you. Just on that though, on the rep ranges thing, something that we talk about a lot, and it's probably worth saying it again because I think we can never say this too much, is that if you're using a rep range and you're hitting the same reps on every single set and you're at the top of the rep range, you are not training hard enough. If it says 3 sets of 8 to 12, for example, and you're doing 3 sets, 12, 12, 12, every single exercise, you're not training hard enough. I had a guy say to me the other day, he said, yeah, these new home workouts you're giving me, they're such a breeze. I'm doing them in like 30 minutes. So I looked at his log, every single exercise. I'd written like 12 to 20 because I kept it quite a wide range because thinking he hasn't got much equipment. So, you know, I put the tempos in, I made it like, tried to make the exercise harder. And I thought 12 to 20, the idea of being a wide range, depending on the difficulty, you're just hitting 20, 20, 20, 20, like the whole way across. I was thinking, there's no way this is done properly. Firstly, doing 20 reps on any exercise it should gas you if you're done properly. But secondly, if you're getting 20 and then you're getting 20 again after a minute's rest, like there's a serious intensity gap. So that's one quick way to ramp up your intensity. If you're finding yourself hitting that top end range of the reps every single set, you need to do a few things different. Firstly, you can either on that first set, if you're way off failure, just break out that rep range. It's okay. Like you like Ed said earlier, if it says 8 to 12, but you've massively undercooked it, just do more reps on that first set if you're counting that as your first set. Or if you're halfway through the set and you realize it's probably a warm-up set, just stop the set, take a minute and do it with proper working weight. And then the second thing is to actually add weight. As crazy as that might sound, add weight and try and get towards the bottom end of the rep range and then work your way up. Or you may do something like, I'm going to pick one weight, which will give me 8 to 10 reps. Second set, I might get 8 to 10, but it might be on the lower end. And third rep, I might drop the weight a little bit just to stay in the rep range. And that way you're challenging yourself in each set, as opposed to going through the motions and not really getting anything out of it. And this is where people don't get much out of their training program because they aren't maximizing the basics of just picking the right weight. The weight should
Yeah.
challenge you. If you're doing 8 to 12 reps and you get 12 reps, that should be 12 all out. There shouldn't be a 13th possible.
I think this comes from though people looking at the exercise as a whole rather than each set, because I think some people will view it as, okay, so I've got 3 sets of 8 to 12. I need to get 3 sets of 12 reps with a certain weight before I then increase the weight. Whereas what we need you to look at is each set as a separate thing. So you need to use as much weight as you can in order to perform 8 to 12 reps in that first set. Once you're then hitting 12 reps on that for that first set, then the first set, the following time you do it, you can increase the weight. Then look at set 2 as a separate entity, because then that you're going to be fatigued, so performance is going to be lower, but that's fine. You just then go again 8 to 12. You find a weight that you can do for that rep range. If in set 2 you can then hit 12 reps with that, next week for set 2 you can increase the weight. Set 3, same thing again. If you don't hit 12 and you hit, let's say, 9 reps, just stick with that weight the following week and then aim to progress the reps. So if you have a rep range, I would recommend sticking with the same weight until you hit the top of the rep range for that set. And then once you do that, you can increase the weight. That will likely result in a reduction in reps, and then you can just repeat the cycle. But viewing it as set 1, set 2, set 3, if it's 3 sets, it's 3 separate things, and comparing set 1 to set 1 the previous time, set 2 to the previous time, can ensure that you're trying to progress from what you did last time, rather than just looking at the exercise as a whole, which results in the first 2 sets being warm-up sets, and that last set being hard. Because ultimately, if you get 20, 20, 20, that means the first set you probably could have got near a 50. I think I did something with different limited equipment and stuff. I've had some of my training, I've been using the same weight across 3 sets. Recently been training at home, but my reps might look like 12, 8, 6 across 3 sets. And that's because if you are taking them or you are pushing them hard, you're staying within that, 3 reps in reserve to failure, fatigue's going to accumulate, and so performance will decrease. But ultimately, those sets hard, as far as you can, then you can ensure that you're still getting a great stimulus from it, and it's just the high levels of fatigue that are causing the drop off in performance. But it's the reps, the closer you get to failure, those reps become more and more valuable. So as long as you've got those in each of your sets, it doesn't matter if you're not hitting 12 on every single one.
The other thing to consider is people vary in how they maintain performance over sets. So some people will be able to maintain performance quite high, even with fatigue. Some people will be able to do like 8, 8, 8 and still be going all out. Some people will drop off regardless. And that's one of the learning things you have to pay attention to is, are you someone who will always drop off in reps regardless? Because if so, you're gonna shoot yourself in the foot if you're trying to aim to max out each set. And you should probably use the first one as your sort of key indicator. And once you dominate that first set, then add the weight and then adjust the other 2 accordingly. But that's a massive variance I find in people, and some people can maintain that ability to perform, and others will always drop off no matter what.
Yeah, especially females. Yeah,
they'll always get 8, 7,
females
6.
are really good.
Yeah, females will be good at
that.
keeping
Great. They have great recovery. Yeah, great recovery between sets, but they don't seem to be as with like max intensity. They seem to not be as good as they are going from like set to set, so they would, this is why I remember back in the gym, females would absolutely destroy all my male clients with their leg workouts, like they would always put them to shame. They could literally just lunge for like years. I'm like, oh my God, that would break me. How are you doing this and having a chat?
Yeah, they've been pushing them to failure on the leg press while it's like talking.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, they'll be talking, describing their whole experience, right? And then 1 minute later, they repeat the same thing.
Yeah.
We'd do that. And we'd be on the floor for 10 minutes.
Oh, done. Yeah.
So understanding that between with yourself is important, like, because that way you stop beating yourself up if you're dropping off, and you know that that's normal. And you know that if you are someone who always gets 8.76, that's probably a cue to go up, as opposed to waiting to get to 8.88. Because 8.88 is never going to happen for you, no matter what you do. And you might always get stuck at 8.77 or whatever it is. And it's like, okay, just add the weight and you're probably better off. I find that happens a lot with my chin-ups. And I think there's a lot, I used to find this a lot when I was PTing, in that people find it hard to add reps to weighted chin-ups, but do really well at keeping it at like 5s. I don't know if you've ever found that, where you can add weight and you can repeat that quite often. You can do lots of sets of 5, but trying to add reps suddenly, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, no,
I think it's the relative increase is huge, you know, like from a percentage point of view.
But in terms of reps, right? Add 1 rep, try and take your chin up, say 20 kilos to 5 to 20 kilos to 8 is a massive feat. Like but going from 20 kilos to 5 to 22.5 to 5 isn't as big of a feat.
Yeah, I find my performance in like the 5 to 7 rep range is way more impressive than, say, like if I just went to like say my back off set like 8 to 10 or something, and then trying to, like you said, like push. If you are at the bottom end of that rep range of a higher rep scheme like 8 to 10, I find progressing those sets a lot harder than the heavier sets.
Yeah, I don't enjoy 8 to 12.
Yeah,
I'm an endurance bunny.
Do you like doing high reps?
Yeah, because I remember a couple of years ago when I was working with Menno, he got me to do some like testing to sort of get my starting weights for certain things. Obviously, this is like a rough guide, but you would work up to say a 3 RM to the best of your ability for that exercise. Then you would reduce the load by 20%, and then the test was to go, okay, do as many reps as you can with that weight.
Oh yeah.
So, and you know, usually if you reduce 20%, you're maybe working within that 80 to 85% of your max. Most guys, or if you're more like type 2, if you're more power based, you probably fall between that 6 to 8 rep range for certain exercises. And if you're more like type 1 or more built for endurance, so to speak, you would actually, you know, get up to past 10 to 12 reps. And I found that was really applicable to like my leg work. So my RDLs would go super high from like a reps perspective, and squats, I could squat and rep and RDL relatively heavyweight for me for higher reps. But once I got to like that 85, 90, 95% mark, I was just like, nah, done. It's too heavy, you know? So
yeah.
Interesting though.
What happens over the time, I find, is that you start learning what type of exercises suit you for higher reps, what type of exercises you don't want to go below 5 on. Like I don't ever want to go below 5 on an RDL. Mainly for me, I think it's a safety element. I just feel like my brain almost starts thinking, no, I can't do this. So I like staying between but then I don't like doing more than like 8, because then I find like my technique starts to degenerate, or I feel like my core tension isn't as strong. So again, that safety element. So like RDLs, I never really do. I think I just keep it like 5-6 reps. Even if it's an easier set or a hard set, I'll just stay 5-6 reps, but I'll use that as my gauge to go up or down. And then things like, even things like split squats, I find like after like 8-9 reps, it just becomes an endurance fest rather than an actual tension like on the muscle for me. So I just keep it again like between 5 and 10 reps max.
I think it can depend a lot on the setup, because I think, say you're in a Smith machine, I think there's the ability to push them a bit higher.
Yeah,
but especially if you're just holding dumbbells.
But then again, like for leg press, I won't go anything below 10 reps.
Yeah, no, I was going to say the same. I have 10 as the absolute bottom, and even then that's like a hard bottom. I prefer being like nearer 12 and up. I go as high as 20 on leg press, because I just feel like the risk to reward and like the amount of weight that you're then having to load up onto it. Not only one point, it's just time consuming, you know, especially like, you know, with since obviously all the COVID stuff, when the gyms have been open, the gym I go to, you have hour slots, and like, not saying like I'm so strong it takes me an hour to load the leg press, but like if you've got loads of you're trying to get in a session, the amount of warm-up sets and, you know, like loading and unloading, like it does play a part. But also I just think it's not worth there's no need to put that much weight on when you can just go slightly higher or add a pause or whatever, and still get the same benefit from it, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, leg press is definitely one of the biggest ego lifts. Like people would love to go 6 to 8 reps on it, but they get no benefit out of it because the set lasts about 10 seconds, and they've only moved about 10 inches in total, 1 inch per rep. So that's why I think high reps for sure.
Yeah, but I think it's a really good point that you say in terms of finding what rep ranges work for you in terms of your body, but also in terms of different exercises. Because I'm the same with RDLs, and then say like a barbell squat or anything like that, I find that it becomes like an aerobic. My like aerobic fitness becomes like a limiting factor if I start pushing reps really high with stuff like that.
That being said, like a hack squat for 20 reps is going to grow your legs like nothing else, and that's going to kill you, right?
But I think then finding what movements, like maybe when you are a bit more locked in with a hack squat or a leg press, then pushing up to those high reps is great. When there is a big bracing element with an RDL or a squat or something like that, that's when, you know, keeping the reps lower,
Yeah.
so you're not having to brace for as long can be more beneficial.
That's
You
a
know,
very
like-
good general rule of
Yeah.
thumb, I think. Yeah.
You know what, back movements, I've always found like I don't like going above 8 reps on back. And that's just, I like staying around like 5 to 8 on back, because I find after 8 for me becomes too much of a forearm and biceps get involved and just feel more arm fatigue. But I feel like I get a really good contraction around 6, 7, 8 reps.
But is that what sort of exercise? Is that more like rows, chins, that sort of
Yeah,
stuff?
across the board, even like pull downs, I won't go above 8.
Okay.
Yeah, so for me, if I'm locked in on, like, say, a chest supported row or something like that, I'm quite happy to push them a bit higher. But if I was, say, to do a bent
Yeah.
over row or something like that, I'd probably be standing
Yeah.
like the 6 to 10 kind of rep range.
Yeah, because the lower back will start to kick in.
Mm.
Yeah.
But this is all
Interesting.
stuff, like we've said before, with, you know, trial and error. You need to get in and feel those things, and those are the things that you accumulate over time as you build up your training awareness and awareness of your body. And those are the kind of changes that you can then make over time. Like for now, if I'm editing my program, I'm not making big overhauls and massively switching around, you know, big lifts in my program. I might just think, actually, from a logistical point of view or from a safety point of view or something, or I might just shift that rep range slightly there, or I'll just put this in. And it's making little tweaks just from things you pick up over time and
Yeah.
doing the program. It's just tweaking to make it a bit more optimal. Even just logistical things like, oh, when I go from this movement to this movement, there's always a cue here or whatever. Or, you know, some gyms, if they haven't got much weight on the stack, you might find, oh, I'm already maxing this out. Or maybe if I just put it as the next exercise down, I'll come into it slightly more fatigued, and then there's more progression to have from it, or whatever it is. So it's little tweaks rather than every 4 weeks a complete new overhaul of exercises.
Yeah, you can learn so much about your body through it. If you just stay aware. It takes ages to build up, though. It's not something you just build up in 6 weeks. But once you do, you really build a bank of like how you like to train. I think that's the thing, is how you like to train. Like there's a few things I do which probably won't, like, for most people it's like, oh, it's not really training. Like I don't like doing more than like 2 sets per exercise, because I just like going all out for those 2 sets. Like I like the idea of just leaving it all on the tank for 1 or 2 times, and those 2 times have to be in different rep ranges as well, because I like treating each one as an individual thing, as opposed to like pacing myself or like thinking and just repeating the same thing. I don't really, and there's certain body parts I'll only do in certain rep ranges, certain body parts I'll do in higher rep ranges. But you just find what you like, and psychologically you can buy into the most, because that's the main thing. You've got to have a real big buy-in to your program. But that doesn't come at the beginning, because you don't know what you actually enjoy. You just got to develop this over time. Then you can cultivate that buy-in to really love what you do in your training.
Yeah, and I think a key underlying common denominator with whatever all of us are talking about is effort level. You know, whether you like doing 8 rep sets, 20 rep sets, 10 sets, 2 sets, it doesn't matter. What matters is, what are you willing to put the most effort into? As AV said, you know, that's what gets him excited. That's what gets him to want to train, you know? So as you can see, there are many, many ways to grow muscle, to get better in the gym, to progress. But the key fundamental thing is finding that way that you personally like to train, and the way that you like to exert effort. And that, again, is going to be individual. And that's also going to be something that you develop over months, years, a long time, you know. I think it's very important. I think it's very overlooked.
I think buy-in is the biggest factor, because you can be as perfect as you want with your variables and your programming and your ordering. But if you're not excited to train, like, you're not going to do it with all that intensity. So when lockdown kicked in, the biggest thing for me was like I cut the length of my workouts quite significantly down. Like I used to train in the gym for about an hour, but now I train like 30, 40 minutes at a time. And a big reason is just the psychological buy-in of being in a room at home, changing the weights nonstop for an hour. It just isn't exciting me. So I was like, all right, what am I going to do that's going to keep me, allowing me to progress? And I was like, I'm just going to strip back all the fluff out of the training and just pick like a couple of movements and do like 1 or 2 sets of it and just go all out on it. I mean, there's a period of time last year where, you know, I was just getting fed up of training at home. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do, my legs is going to be 1 set of Bulgarians and 1 set of RDLs. I'm just going to take each one to failure. And that's it. That's all I was doing for a good couple of months. And it was literally lasting me like 20 minutes, but I was getting everything I needed out of it. And because I was going in with a mindset of, let me just try and add a rep, or let me try and add a weight, it made it exciting and it kept me progressing. So that's the key, really, is effort level and being able to take a set to the absolute max.
Yeah. And Yeah, finding what you enjoy is definitely important. I think just to build on what you said there, because I'm sure a lot of people listening are loving the idea of just having to do 2 sets and then being able to tick off their session, or I'll just do 30-minute workouts. The amount of volume you need to do to provide a stimulus is directly linked with the effort levels you put in for those sets. And so the higher your effort levels in each set, or that relative intensity, so how close you're pushing to failure in each set, the higher that is, the less volume you'll need. So when Akash says he does, 1 to 2 sets, 1 to 2 working sets per exercise, that's because he's taken them to failure. He can't do another set with good form or without the help of someone else doing it. If you're leaving 4 or 5 plus reps in the tank, then that one set is going to provide a much lower stimulus than what Akash is getting in that one set. And so this is where you might then need to do 4 or 5 sets of that same exercise to provide the same stimulus as what he's getting from that one set. And so that's where not only like relative intensity in terms of effort is so important, but also form, because you can put all the effort in you want, but if it's not being directed accurately, then it's not going where we want. And this is where I think a big bugbear of mine is when people say, and I know we kind of said at the beginning, form needs to be a priority, but once you're then into a program, people saying, oh no, I've just been focusing on form recently, or oh yeah, I progressed, but form's got a little bit sloppy. Like, both of those are a waste of time. Initially, at the very start, you might need to just focus on form just to get the movement right. But once you've then got that base, just focusing on form with really low levels of effort in your sets, or just allowing form just to get really loose in order to just put an extra to increase the number on the bar or whatever, is just a complete waste of time, because it's the effort paired with the execution that's going to provide that stimulus. There's no point having an accurate stimulus, directing it accurately to the muscle, but without any effort there, or putting loads of effort in, but just having all different muscles working.
That's what brings the meditative state of training, because then you have to combine precision of execution with intensity. If you only have one of them, your head's not fully in it. If you're only training hard with no form, you're not really getting much out of it. And if you're training super precise but with no intensity, your mind can easily wander off. If you combine the two, you're super dialed in. And I think that takes, again, years to cultivate the ability to do low volume training, which is the idea of less sets. It only comes through experience. You can't do that in week 1 in your journey. You can't do that even 2 years in. You need to really be able to cultivate intensity, and that intensity is relative. Like, what you think is intensity a couple of years ago isn't intensity now. Like, your barometer always expands, but that's an important caveat to have here as well. Like, when I see, like, for example, Ed doing the leg press, that is like when your veins look like they're about to pop out your head. That's when you know you're going hard. But if you're doing it and you're looking around, you're looking at yourself and all these sorts of things, you're not going. This is why tracking videos is so important, because you can gauge, at least you can gauge your precision, but also you can look at that last rep, because sometimes you think the last rep's hard, but it's not actually hard.
Yeah. And rep speed is really good when you are looking at these things, because although we want form to remain constant throughout the set, as fatigue increases, form shouldn't diminish. So we want the reps to look exactly the same in terms of your movement. The speed of your concentric, or the lifting part of the rep, should slow down as you get tired and as the rep gets harder. So let's say you're on the leg press, depth, control, all that's going to stay the same. But as you press the weight away from you, extend your legs, the speed at which you're able to do that should get slower and slower and slower. And often I think we see training videos where the last rep, it comes up really fast, that the platform always leaves their feet, and then they lock it, and you kind of you think, the reality is like that last one should be pretty slow. And I think
they do plyometrics.
It's just coming off. It's their spotters at the other end of the leg press, got to keep the sled from coming off the end. And I'm not saying just to go until you get stuck with your knees on your chest in your first session, but as you get more comfortable with leg press and you progress over time, sometimes that last rep, you should have the safety pins in, but you're going to get halfway, it'll slow down, and you'll think, it's 50-50. Am I going to finish this? Normally, if you keep pushing hard, you're capable of more than you think. But if that last rep's flying up, then it really shouldn't be your last rep.
Yeah, it's that gun to the head mentality. With the concentric stuff, though, again, this is another. It probably doesn't apply to many people, but it's probably because we've trained a lot of people in person. But then there are some people who will always, they're the more like fast twitch type people that they will literally do every rep will look the same. There's suddenly they can't do another rep.
It'll just die off. Yeah.
Yeah, like you think, what happened there? And then, but you start to understand when you, that they know their limit better than you do, because they'll genuinely just switch off. But that's probably not the majority. I haven't seen many people do that. When you do see it, they're pretty freaky, and they don't really do go above like 6 reps at all. They're very explosive, but there is that element to it as well.
Yeah. But even then, the principle's still the same. The principle still is that last rep was slow.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Even if they were going fast, even if that last rep now is a grind, okay, they've hit that point. You know what I mean? And I think I think if anyone's going to take anything away from today, is that it's like your technique, your depth, everything should stay the exact same from rep 1 to the last rep. The only thing that should change is how quickly that weight comes up. I think it's a really easy, practical takeaway for people to be able to gauge intensity. And yeah, as Ed said, if your first and last rep are the same speed and the leg press could just fly off your feet, then yeah, that's not intense enough to stimulate any sort of growth, any sort of progress. So
I'm just picturing that in my head. Imagine someone
me
actually
too.
doing plyometrics with leg press.
I know. Oh, let's YouTube it.
I'm sure someone has done that.
Oh, there'll be loads. Yeah. Have you seen like the people on Instagram doing like sitting sideways in a leg press and like pressing it?
Yep.
Doing that glute stuff on there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably an episode here, like what are pointless exercises to do in the gym.
Yeah. But again, that falls into the field that you need to change exercises to just try and, like increase that just interest. And I think when I look back to, like when I was PT and like earlier on in my career when I was doing it and I was changing programs more often, I was probably doing like we said, like every 4 weeks. And it was almost an accepted thing in the industry, like you change program every 4 weeks to keep them interested. But ultimately what I learned over time was it's results what they're ultimately interested in. So if you're getting your client results, they're happy to stay with the program for 12, 16, 24 weeks, whatever it is. Because ultimately, like if you are, looking at your logbook, trying to progress it, that is exciting. Like I really rarely make any changes. When I do, it's like I said before, making little tweaks here and there. But I'm really excited to train because the progressions are exciting. So if you're getting, results with your clients in the gym, but also in terms of like body composition and stuff, then, helping them outside the gym as well, they're going to be interested, engaged and excited and stay with you. It's not this short term, just changing it each time. That's ultimately going to keep them coming back to you.
Yeah, I haven't really changed. You'll probably find that you don't really change the core structure of it unless there's a change in your equipment, i.e. you have to train at home.
Or
and even then or injuries, right?
Yeah. But like you said, you find things that work. Like I know that there's only a certain amount of lower back loading exercises I can do a week. If I try and increase the frequency or I try and add in like a good morning as well or something like that, I find like my lower back just doesn't recover enough. And then the next time I try and do it, performance goes. And that all just links into the trial and error. Like, you'll find with the intensity that you train at, a certain amount of volume, all right, I can train legs every 4 days. You might be like, oh, actually, I really want to try every 3 days. You find that performance starts dipping. And this is where I've adapted things with clients. I'll normally, have them at a slightly higher volume when they're newer because the training is not going to be as effective per set. If it gets to a point where they're being consistent, but then they're struggling with their recovery, maybe that's when you drop from 3 sets to 2 sets for some movements, see how it is, reassess, and then you can, whether you need to make more changes from there. But it's instead of an overhaul just randomly every 4 weeks, it's just seeing what you've got, seeing what the outcome is in terms of, measuring it with progressions in terms of logbook and your recovery. And then just making tweaks from there. And it ends up just being like this. You start with one program and over years, you just make tweaks and tweaks and tweaks. It might look completely different in 2 years' time, but it's just little tweaks rather than complete overhaul.
Yeah. I think the other thing, just to finish up, is that you should feel a bit anxious before each of your sessions after the first 4 to 8 weeks. Once you've mastered those movements, you should have a level of anxiety going into your sessions, positive anxiety. You should feel that, else, that's probably a good barometer to know if you're going hard or not. If you're feeling a bit anxious, because you should think, okay, I got that last time. How on earth am I going to get this again? right?
Yeah.
But I think that's, like if you, I know, going to do some public speaking, you'll have a little bit of anxiety or some nerves beforehand. You nail the speech, and then afterwards you're on this absolute high, and you've done something you haven't done before, and whatever. That's exactly the same with your sets. You're approaching it. You start to, it should be a positive anxiety, but starting to, like you said, to question, that was what I did last week. How am I going to beat that? You go in and you smash it, and then afterwards, whether you do actually progress it or not, as long as you've given it your all, you do just feel this sense of elation and pride, I guess.
Yeah, and on that, if you're not feeling up for it prior to your session, don't skip it. Trust me, you're never going to know how you're going to perform in that session until you start warming up.
Yeah,
I've learned that many a times. I've hit so many PBs going to the gym feeling like death, and I've had horrible sessions, walk in feeling fantastic. So your feelings prior to the gym are meaningless. Just get in there and see what happens.
I actually heard a quote. I can't remember who it's from, but it's some athlete. I'm not sure if it was like a boxer. It was one world champion or something. I listened to an interview really recently, and they were basically asking about missing sessions, and he said he doesn't really do it. And they said, do you go by feel, or is it just 100% what's on paper? And he says he has the rule: I'll always go, and I have to get into my gym kit and do my warm up, and then I decide. If I'm then not feeling it, my body's not feeling good, then I'm allowed to just go home. And then the interviewer said to him, like, how often does that happen? He said it's never happened.
really.
And I can't remember who it is, because it would be good to say who it was. But yeah, it was really good, and basically just sums up what you said there, Ivan.
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing I do with that is if it is a genuinely bad day, I'll just scale back the volume, or I'll just try and or I'll just do the same as last time, but without any expectation of trying to beat it. Maybe just trying to maintain it. Maybe you can be close to maintenance. What usually ends up happening is you maintain it at least. You never really drop off, right? So that's always a plus point. And if you just get into the mindset of I'm just going to do at least a couple, then you end up just doing it all.
Yeah, I do something similar in terms of just go with lower volume. I know, like I train it quite similar to you. I normally will do 2 sets of most exercises, 1 for some. But if I'm feeling real beat up or anything like that, I'll still probably go in and train and aim to use the same loads, but I'll just use 1 set for everything. I think mentally knowing you do your warm ups are all sub maximal. You just got to give it everything for 1 set, and that is going to be enough to maintain and potentially progress as well. And then the session is going to be shorter. There's less like mental fatigue there as well. But also by just reducing, if you half the volume from a session, that's going to allow you to maintain the stimulus while dropping a lot of fatigue. So yeah, if you are questioning whether you should do a workout, go in, maybe you do just drop a set or 2 on each exercise, but just give that set everything you have. Not only will you feel amazing mentally afterwards, but it will give you that balance of a bit of recovery while also getting what you want out of that gym session.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Just show up.
Show up, train hard, and the rest will follow.
Yep.